No, I'm sorry.
Call order a meeting for the normal town council for February 5th, 2024. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here?
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Ms. Harris. Here. Mr. Byers, Ms. Smith. Here. Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. We have no public comment tonight. So we'll move to item 5, presentation of the fiscal year 24-29 proposed budget. The presentation of the budget, unless I hear an objection, I'm going to suspend the rules of debate for item number 5. Okay? All right. It's more like a work session. Nobody's held the time. So this is kind of a preview overview of our budget, and the highlights of our budget, a chance to ask questions for next year's budget. When do we vote on budget?
After tonight's review of the proposed budget, staff will come back the first meeting in March for council to take action on the final budget.
Great. So Pam, I'm going to hand it off to you if you have some introductory comments.
Yes, thank you. The first thing I'm going to do has nothing to do with the budget. Just want to announce that this is our first council meeting with our new parking management system, where we have started the meeting before 6:00 p.m. And so that means, you know, if you park in the deck after 6:00, it's free. So for those in the audience, if you're going to be here for longer than an hour, you should pay attention to the notes that were at the door about registering your vehicle. There is a code that you can enter on the app and should be all set. So we just didn't want anybody to miss that. So it is a new parking system for this, appropriate for this meeting. Now that that's out of the way, prepared to talk about budget. What we are going to review tonight is the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget. As you know, we prepare a 5-year budget plan. So this looks out to fiscal year 28-29. Most of our discussion tonight is going to focus on next fiscal year, which is 24-25. Mr. Hune has a very detailed presentation. There's hard copies of the PowerPoint at the desk for each of you council members to review and take notes as we move along. Following Mr. Hune's presentation, staff is prepared to answer any questions you may have. We can talk about what the budget looks like in terms of more details if you're interested. And so we'll play it by ear based on what council would like to discuss. So first of all, I do want to express appreciation to all the department heads who worked very diligently, as always, on putting their individual department budgets together. And then, of course, the budget committee led by Mr. Hune, Ms. Trepak, who's in the audience, Karen Killingsworth, finance manager. I see Felicia Ock and a number of members of the finance team. So if I missed anyone, I'll let Mr. Hune jump in and express appreciation. And of course, former Assistant City Manager Eric Hansen played a role in helping us get the budget put together. So just thanks to everyone on the team. I think we have a good story to tell, and we're eager to share with you what next fiscal year looks like and how we anticipate ending up current fiscal year. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hune.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Yes, it's a long process. We're always pleased to get to this point in our process. We start typically late July, and to get to this point, it's an effort from department heads, from my team, staff, from the city manager's office, and then ultimately the council. So it's a good day to get here finally. We're not quite done with the budget process yet, but this is significantly a big day. We are going to cover, as Ms. Reese mentioned, the budget process. This is going to be a familiar presentation the council has seen in the past. We'll look at current year projections. We'll spend a lot of time on the proposed budget for 24-25. We'll look at changes between the adopted budget and proposed budget for both revenue and expense. We'll do a brief capital review. We'll look at debt service, of course, water and sewer, health, dental, and then do some review of key fiscal strategies. The first one, of course, is fund balance. We always look at general fund balance. That's a key indicator of our fiscal condition. It's a significant operation to track. The chart before you right now shows, the blue bars show where we expect to end the year in terms of fund balance for general fund. The green line is where we want to end in terms of our fiscal strategy, our target of 15% of expenditures and transfers. As you can see, the budget before you tonight, proposed budget shows us at or above our targets for general fund, which is we always are at. You can certainly see in the current year projection, we're significantly above our target. That is the result of a couple of different things. One, when we closed fiscal year 22-23, we had a good surplus. That rolled into the current fiscal year. We are projecting to continue to see a fairly good year this year. So we will have some excess surplus funds that we're going to allocate as part of this budget process. We are currently going to allocate, I'll go into more detail in a couple more slides, but essentially the money that we have in excess reserves, we're going to allocate next fiscal year as part of the budget process, mostly to transportation funding, road work. We're going to do additional pension funding. We're setting aside some money for economic development. So we're using those excess reserves for core needs and core services as we've done in the past that the council is well aware of. So general fund right now is in good condition for all years. In terms of current year projection and next year projection, we are showing deficits in the current year and the out years. That's completely expected. That's the planned spend down of reserves. We're doing most of that spend down next fiscal year. You can see over $5 million. That's where we're starting to transfer money more to pension funding, more for CIP, more for road work. So you'll see that's part of the budget process this year. So don't be alarmed at that. Those numbers are planned deficits. They're going to bring us down to our reserve levels. And in staff's opinion, we're using those excess reserves in a very meaningful way. Revenues, this chart just essentially shows kind of the mix of our revenue sources, which I know the council is very familiar with. The lion's share of that, of course, is sales tax, and that's both state and local. That continues to grow as a general portion of our overall revenue mix. Property tax is next, of course, income tax, charge for services, and you can kind of see the schedule there in terms of revenue projection for 24-25, which is $94.2 million in the general fund. Now looking at, this is the blue line, red line analysis that we do every year. The blue line represents the revenue, total revenue for the general fund in all of those years. The red line represents what we're projecting now for the current proposed budget. So what we knew a year ago today, about this time a year ago, is the blue line, adopted budget. The red line is what we're expecting now. So in this case, we want to see the red line above the blue line because that shows we're having more revenue projected than we were in the past, which is a good thing. You can see here in current year, it's $2.8 million over our last year's projection for that year. Same for the proposed budget year 24-25. In large part, this is all coming from about $2.8 million of additional revenue for 24-25. A lot of it's from sales tax. State sales tax alone is $1.2 million higher, and I'll give you some more detail on the next slide. Ambulance revenue is up also significantly. Local sales tax also up over what we had projected, and then also food and beverage tax. So we're seeing revenue above what we projected in those areas. We do have a couple of negatives to share. Income tax, and I'll show in a slide or two. That's actually, we're going to have the red line below the blue line. That has come down a little faster than we expected in terms of the budget for adopted. Not significant, but a little less than we expected. So we're modifying our recommendation there. And also utility tax, we've seen essentially kind of return to what it used to be like, which was generally a flat or falling revenue. So we'll cover that a little more. Again, sales tax, 41% of our revenue comes from sales tax general fund. And you can see 1.8 of its combined state and local is for sales tax increase in terms of our projections for the out years and the current year. I do want to talk a little bit about sales tax just to give the council some more information. This chart here shows some history. The blue is actual, the green is what we're projecting for the out years. And you can see, since 2016-17, we had fairly moderate growth, 2.9, 4.2, basically a flat year. Now, 19-20, that 2% growth, 2.2% growth, that was the COVID year where we had significant economic shutdown during that year, although we still had a little bit of a gain from the prior year. In 21, 22, 22, 23, we started seeing some significant growth. And that's basically we're recovering from the pandemic. We're seeing the full economic impact of Rivian hitting. So we saw some significant growth, as the council is well aware, in those years. In those years, we also saw significant surpluses which the town has allocated for pension, paving, and so forth. We don't expect that to continue for obvious reasons. So the green bars, we're showing about a 5% growth over last year, which is actually significant in terms of our history, not of late, but certainly a 5% growth in any revenue source is strong for a municipality. But the 21, 21.7, 13.2, those are going to be gone for a while. We're getting down to more of a moderate growth in revenue. So in those years, we saw some nice surpluses. Those were driven by revenue, of course. And we're thinking now that we're seeing more of that flatten down a little bit. Property tax, 11% of our total revenue. We are seeing a pickup in that area too from adopted to proposed. A lot of this essentially is all coming from our pension funding. As the council is well aware, we need to be 90% funded by 2040 per the state. We are targeting our policy at the town to be 100% funded by 2040. That date is getting closer and closer to a deadline. So we're going to continue to see upward pressure on our contribution to the pension funds. Now, we have had some good news recently. Last couple of years, we've seen gains in our pension funding level. That's a direct function of a few things, but certainly one is the fact that council has approved additional funds going to the pension funds. And we're doing the same thing in this proposed budget. So we're pleased to see that. We are seeing significant EAD growth. We did put out kind of a guiding policy on going forward on funding from pension funds and for property tax levy. But we will continue to see pressure on police, fire, and to some degree IMRF in terms of future pension funding contributions. Income tax, this is the one I said that we've cut back a little bit on. Not a lot, about $316,000 in the current year, and we're reflecting that in the out years too. Again, it's not typical that we have the red line below the blue line, but it does happen occasionally where we pare back on one of our projections. So not overly concerned about that. In terms of some history there, this one is really quite remarkable, the state income tax. I gave a little more history here. Again, the blue is the actual revenue in those years, and green is the out years. A very similar story to sales tax. We saw significant growth in 2021, 22, 23. In the past, we would see up and down a lot, and there's a lot of things that drive that. And of course, the economy drives it significantly, but the state would change rates on occasion. A number of years ago, they would change how they share the formula with the municipalities, so that makes it very difficult to predict. It's been fairly stable the last few years, and similar to sales tax chart, we saw a significant upward motion in that revenue. Again, kind of unprecedented numbers in terms of economic activity, both the sales tax and income tax. 21, 22, 25.8%, 12.5%, 2023. So those are really large numbers, and again, they contributed to our surpluses in those years. However, we are seeing a slowing per se of the economy. We're all well aware what's going on in 24 and the possible mild recession that is coming sometime this year, maybe. So we have kind of flattened the revenue out for the current year of $8.5 million for 23-24, and then we're just growing by 1% for the next year. Again, being a little, not pessimistic, but being a little more guarded in terms of where we're at with the recession and recognizing some possible issues there by not growing that revenue source too much. Charges for services. This is a 9% of the revenue. What it makes up is the lion's share of that is refuse collection, our garbage collection process, $4.5 million in total. Ambulance fees are recorded as part of charges for services in general fund. ISU, fire rescue services, those are the three major ones. There's more than obviously than that in there, but these are the significant ones. And then the lion's share of that increase, again, the red line's above the blue line, which is a good place to be. Most of that's coming from ambulance fees this year in terms of increases. And then Parks and Recreation and Cultural Arts, this is kind of the last category I'll look at for revenue. Again, the significant revenues that are recorded in that line are CBM's revenue in terms of admissions, golf, aquatics, before after school programs and youth programs. All very significant numbers. Generally, all of them are up. The biggest increase at 405 was actually with golf. We're seeing some increases there. So in terms of moving to operating expenses next in general fund, but in terms of revenue picture, things remain very strong. We've had several good years of revenue. We've always generally had good years of revenue. They've been extraordinarily good the last couple of years. So we're foreseeing them kind of going back to a more modest growth, and the budget reflects that. So less growth, but still certainly good economic growth for the community. Operating expenses, again, this kind of breaks things down for the council. $99.4 million planned for 24-25, the adopted budget year coming up. The lion's share, of course, is salary and benefits, contract payments, transfers. I'll kind of walk through some what those are for you in the next couple of slides. In terms of total revenue, a lot going on here. In the current year, we had a $1.5 million increase in revenue that we're projecting for current year. That's primarily the result of two things. One is some Medcom upgrades that are happening this year, but the lion's share of it really came from inflation for vehicle and reserves. As the council is well aware, the general fund supports all the expenditures for vehicle and equipment that we use, police, fire, parks and rec, public works, and so forth. We buy everything from ambulances to fire trucks to police cars to mowers to waste trucks and so forth. We have noticed over this last year or two that prices for vehicles have increased significantly, particularly the ones that we're using. So we've had to essentially transfer more funds into vehicle and reserve to make up for the replacement of those vehicles. So we buy a vehicle, a truck now for $40,000, and we thought it was going to be $30,000. The next year, the replacement in the out year for that truck is going to be up. So we're having to raise everything up in those out years to support that expenditure. That was the kind of the major thing this year in terms of, I guess you want to call it a surprise in terms of what we weren't expecting to see happen. We knew there'd be some inflation. Inflation in the prior years have kind of calmed down, utilities and gas and so forth. We kind of had that occur last year. This year, we're seeing the vehicles catch up to us in terms of inflation, which we were able to moderate through our budget process. Again, for current year or for year 2045, the budget cycle, $7.9 million more in expense compared to without last year. That sounds like a lot, but to be quite honest, it's all basically taking care of excess surplus for the most part. We're transferring a lot more money out of general fund to support road work, the roadway fund, to support capital. We're contributing more money to the pension funds. As the council is well aware, we fund pensions through general fund and property tax levy and other general fund revenues. We funded 100% by 2040. Last year, we actually contributed $3 million more to each, both police and fire, on top of our regular process of contribution. We're estimating we're going to do the same thing in the next budget cycle. We're putting $1.5 million each into police and fire over and above the levy amount. Again, we're using for excess reserves to support our pension funding, which certainly could use the additional dollars. And then also road work and CIP. And then the out years, you can see that we're above the line there. That's essentially just more of the same. With our increase in economic activity and revenue, we're able to transfer more over to roadway and to CIP. Salary and benefits. You can see here this chart, it shows kind of the breakouts of who is spending what, or in terms of a $44.8 million salary budget from the $94.4 million in total. A lot of it's police, fire, public works, and parks and rec. Again, kind of those core services is where all the dollars are going in terms of general operations for the general fund. Looking at the changes year over year, again, the blue line is adopted 5-year budget, and the red line is where we're at now. We are seeing some increases in personnel costs. The savings over in the current period It's essentially vacancy savings and turnover where employee retires at a certain level and we bring a new one in and there's less revenue, less salary costs because of the new employee, and also vacancy. Going forward, we always budget at full employment, no vacancies at all. So we're seeing that. Plus, we are increasing staff slightly. You can see there 1 in admin, 1 in INT, 3 in police, and then 2 in public works. All these to help meet varying levels of service demands placed on the town. Contract payments, this is a category that's got quite a few things going on. The major ones are police and fire contributions. We also have mental health contribution to CVB, to EDC, developer agreement costs, repair liability insurance here. We have a commitment to Connect Transit out of this line, out of this type of expenditures. The only real change here, and this line stays pretty stable, generally speaking. However, the bump there in 24-25 is all our increased contribution to police and fire pension, as well as additional money going to public art for the current year and all the out years. Transfers, 17%. Again, you're going to see some of the same theme here in terms of what I've already discussed. The biggest transfers here are to roadway capital, vehicle equipment, and debt service. Again, the general fund is moving money into those funds to support its operations. In the current year, or the current year right now, I've already mentioned we've had to increase funding or transfers to help support the inflationary cost increases for vehicle and equipment that took place this year and the out years. Also, we're, as part of that use of excess reserves in 2025, about $4.9 million there. We're transferring over to roadway fund, to capital, and to the underpass fund also. And then we continue that, again, additional transfers out because we're in an economic position to be able to do that, to fund those areas. So really, in terms of general fund summary, all of our balance are target for all years. Ms. Reese mentioned this a little bit. We've had difficult budget years in the past, and the town council has cut and cut positions and programs, and we react to those things. We had a number of years of status quo budgets where we were able to manage everything very well and maintain the fiscal position, but we weren't doing as much capital as we wanted to do in terms of town facilities and parks and rec and even perhaps roadway. Last few years has not been the case. Last few years has been basically more available in terms of flexibility, which has been very nice. So for last year, it's almost the exact same slide from last year in terms of this contribution. We're doing more towards funding pensions. With this budget, similar to last year, we're doing more towards funding transportation. Again, similar to last year, more towards capital projects, which are solely needed for town facilities and parks and rec facilities. We've added some positions as necessary. So we've got some flexibility to be able to do a lot more, which is great news in terms of budgetary processes. We did have some inflationary costs, mostly vehicle equipment that we managed through our revenue sources. But generally speaking, this is very similar to last year in terms of budget position. We're able to do everything we've always done and even more than last year. In terms of vehicle reserve, this again shows the ending fund balance projection for all the years in the budget, current year plus the 5 years. You can see that goes up and down depending on spending. We're spending about $5.1 million a year on average, which is kind of a pay-as-you-go cash capital campaign to maintain our vehicle and equipment. 25 plus million over the next 5 years. So a lot goes out of that fund every year. It's not consistent. We'll buy several cars or several trucks or several things at different times. So you can see that balances up and down. We always try to make sure that the general fund is supporting that fund. So we meet our target for all 5 years. In this case, we are balanced. We're at our target for all 5 years. We're ahead of our target in some of the early years, but you can see as we spend down, we'll get down to that target of 75% of total expenditures. But that fund is in good position also. Capital expenditures, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we did cover it already in December, but it's certainly worth talking about again a little bit. This, of course, is the capital plan. $209 million of spending in the current year, the next 5-year budget, 457 projects ranging from all kinds of things from facilities to roadwork to water to sewer to stormwater to ARPA funds. It's really kind of an endless schedule of spending that we're doing in terms of the capital need there. To give you, again, just overview, we're doing more in all these areas. Transportation, $11.3 million more. Others, 7.9. The others, mostly our vehicle and equipment reserve funds. Water, sewer, facilities, parks, all up. Okay, stormwater drainage is down a bit, $100,000, but but that's going to happen occasionally. So generally speaking, we're up from last year. We've talked a lot with the city manager's office. We thought last year's capital planning was significant, $175+ million, and now we're delivering 209. So again, I don't want to overstate it, but we are doing much more in terms of capital, which is good. Debt-wise, again, very solid position. We watch this very closely from a number of different angles. Just to remind the council, our funding sources for paying our annual debt service come from general fund, come from the TIF fund, come from water and sewer has a piece of their own debt that they pay for from their rates. We have a federal subsidy coming from the feds for one of our debt issues. We always maintain sufficient dollar values in the fund to pay that. We've been reaffirmed this year for our AAA rating with Fitch and our AA+ with Moody's. So we maintain a good position. In fact, I recently was talking to the city manager about the Moody's rating. We're one tick below AAA with them, and we had that during where we weren't as strong as we are now, and we weren't weak before. We had a very strong balance sheet before. So I think if we ever ask them for a rating in the future, we might be able to push them more for AAA from Moody's. We'll see, because we're in even a better fiscal position than we were when we received that rating. In terms of overview, the debt continues to decrease. As you can see, from 24 to 25 in this budget year, we'll be down to 9 non-bond issues. We're paying off one of them this year. Our debt's going down by $3.1 million. That's all basically principal payments that are part of the regular payment process. And you can see the breakout there between general fund, water and sewer, and then we do have some water fund IEPA loans, and then the fire station and truck funding that we've done recently there. No new debt issues planned in the near future. That can always change, of course, as needs change, but for now we continue to see the debt decrease as it has been for a number of years. Just a quick reminder to the council, I know we're all aware that the Uptown TIF is going to be, that TIF is going to be disappearing for the town in 27, 28, or in 2026 calendar year. We've known that this for a number of years, and for a number of years we've been managing a debt restructure program to manage that loss. Right now we get about $2 million a year that goes towards a debt payment for all the debt we have in the town. That will disappear in fiscal year 27, 28. And we have a plan to deal with that. Just a reminder again, the plan is not to propose new revenue to replace it. We're not going to extend debt to make our cash flow payments less by kind of remortgaging the debt and pushing that long. We're basically going to be either doing some kind of remodeling, which represents basically early debt payoff, or carving out certain debt payments with cash. And then also we'll hopefully enjoy more refunding opportunities as the economy improves. This next sketch is pretty busy. I'm not going to go through it in detail, don't worry, but again, just a reminder, this is kind of a working document that we use in finance to kind of track where we're at. The debt program to solve the loss of the TIF revenue is a long-term program with several steps. We've already done the first action one, which is to refinance the bond issue for our RZ bonds, our 2010 RZ bonds, recovery zone bonds. We've done action 2, which was to pay off the 2012 bonds with our excess cash, and that removed the debt need for those debt payments. We're kind of in action 3 now, where we have 4 bond issues that we were looking at over the next few years for refunding. The 2013 refunding bond, that's available now. The green means that in that year, those payments are now callable, which means we could pay them off if we wanted to, or we could refund them. We are not going to refund anything yet, although we're looking closely at it now. The rates we have now are not quite, we have better rates than we get in the market. However, that is starting to move a little bit. So we'll look at that action 3 which would be refinancing one of those debts as they come callable. We do have another bond coming callable, the 2014 bond issue will be callable in June 1st of this year. So we're working closely with Measure Financial now to evaluate those. We could refund maybe one of them now for some very small savings. However, the economy is improving significantly, rates are coming down, so I'd rather grab the savings later on. And even Mesro says, yeah, wait, for that, don't do it yet. So we'll grab some savings in those years, hopefully soon. We might have a transaction this calendar of 24 for refunding. We'll see. But again, the restructure plan didn't really require us to do refunding. That was just going to be kind of extra. Most of the restructuring for this was to either pay off debt early or to carve debt out later on in the out years. So action 4 there is it demonstrates where those little red circles in action 4, we're actually going to pay those principal payments off once it becomes callable with reserve funds in debt service. So as the council knows, we've discussed it several times. It's kind of a complicated plan, but nothing's changed. We're moving forward with it as is. We've made a few tweaks here and there, but it's working very well. Water and sewer funds, again, good story here. The water fund, this chart represents all the fund balances by year. There's 4 funds that make up the water fund. They have an operating fund like their general fund. They have a capital fund, a debt service fund, and a replacement fund. We have operating targets for that fund. For operating, we want to be at 20%. You can see right now we're currently at 30, which is good. We do drop down to 11.5 in the out years, so we're a little suspicious of the out years in terms of where we might stand. We are seeing a drawdown there. In terms of capital, that's the blue fund. We'd like to keep that about $1.5 million. You can see it's kind of non-existent in year 4 and 5. So there's a little, we're kind of watching that very closely too. We do have a rate increase planned, 2% for all years, and that will keep us where we're at here. And then we evaluate that every single year going forward. So years 4 and 5, a little concerning, but they're not red alert yet. When those years become closer to mature years, more current years, we'll evaluate them too. But for now, it's stable with that 2% increase. Sewer, so sewer, actually, this might be the one time you hear me say this. The current year and out years look pretty good. But that might change next year. So, again, our goal there, they have 4 funds similar to water, capital, debt service, operating, and replacement. The purple there is our operating fund. We want to keep that at 25%. It's at 28.3 now and 25.6 with a 2% rate increase program for all years. Capital is in pretty good shape. I guess capital drops below our target a little bit there in a couple of years, but again, very close. And those are pretty far out years to be overly concerned about. So sewer's in good shape. We are in the process of finalizing a new sewer inventory capital master plan that might impact this in the next budget cycle. So we'll see. But we're going into that plan in a good position with this fund. So. Health and dental. This fund is actually looking pretty good too. Again, another good story. Last year we saw some improvement in our position, and what we thought last year was going to happen, it actually performed how we expected. So we set the budget again this year with those same assumptions. Now we still have issues, of course, with specialized drug market. The prices are very high. Claims can anytime become very volatile. It's been fairly stable the last couple of years because we got past COVID. Things have kind of stabilized a little bit. So we're seeing a little more actual compared to our expected, which is nice. Again, I'm not overly concerned. There's been years I've been working with this fund quite a bit. Last year it improved. This year we're continuing to see a stability. Are we going to see those kind of fund balances against our target? I don't know. It's possible, but it's hard to say. But right now it's in a pretty good position, and we see a favorable future for that in terms of current reality, in terms of trends and claim payments and so forth. Just to review our fiscal strategies. This is green light, yellow light, red light. Green light means good, yellow light means we're a little cautious, red light means we're kind of worried. So in terms of green light, general fund target in great shape, vehicle reserve in great shape, debt service always in great shape, sewer funds in great shape, and so is health and dental fund. You know, these are just kind of context issues. I put water as yellow and general fund contingency as yellow. That you could probably argue those are maybe closer to green or whatever, but certainly not red. The water, because years 4 and 5 are kind of stressed in terms of the reserve levels, so that's kind of just a cautionary tale. And then general fund contingency, to remind the council, we shoot for a 1% of total revenue and expense, or I'm sorry, total expense transfers in the fund as a contingency fund. That would be almost $1 million a year, which is probably a bit high for a contingency fund. We've always had $750,000 as kind of our goal, so we're a little bit below our target with that. This year, a couple of the years we're below the 750, but the good news is we have money in there. It's not as much as I want to see, but I think it's a good position. So basically, the context there is it's cautionary. We have some funds there for emergencies, for opportunities. It's not as much as our target is wanting to have, but it certainly has some funding in it. A couple of things to note here. We did throw a slide in here this year to kind of share with the council just some, I guess, pages we want to call your attention to. I'm not going to go through all these, but these are some pages you can look at your leisure that kind of dispel out some of the more significant parts of the budget, kind of a Reader's Digest read, so to speak, of it, from the overall policies and procedures that we use to all the budgetary funds, to revenue overview and expense overview, the TIF funds, sewer water operations, vehicle equipment. These are kind of the main things. And actually, there's a lot in this document, of course. It's all important stuff from A to Z. But these are the pages you can look at your leisure to kind of give you a good familiar with the town, with its rates, with its revenue structure, policy, and so forth. So you can look at those at your leisure. So kind of to conclude, you know, we're in our reserves are very strong. There's no doubt about that, and our targets look good for the out years, with the exception maybe of water in years 4 and 5 and so forth. We continue to have a good bond rating. We continue to have our conservative budget practices that have served us well for the council. Operational budgets, we have some increases in vehicle costs that we've been able to manage no problem. Some slight increases in staff due for demand issues and service issues. We're doing additional funding for our pensions funds, which is certainly needed, and we're glad we can do that. There's a capital budget. We're up significantly there with road work and town facilities work. So, you know, pensions and road spending will continue to be focused in the future. The economy is kind of anyone's guess. It seems to be getting more and more favorable in terms of what I'm hearing and reading for perhaps not even a recession in 24. You know, you hear like hard landing, soft landing, you know, touch and go and so forth. I probably spend more than the average person does on looking at these things. I did come across a quote that I thought was kind of interesting. It kind of talks about it could be this, it could be that, kind of navigating that idea of where the economy is going. I'll just read it to you guys. You know, economic growth is forecasted to slow down in the first half of 2024, but is expected to pick up again late summer and early fall. So we're seeing that, yeah, it's slowly going to come back real fast. That slowdown in growth is expected to cause unemployment to stall, but not contract. And unemployment rate is forecast to edge up by year end, albeit well below the recession level. So again, there's a lot of give and take with what's going on with the kind of push-pull with the economy. The last thing I've seen and read is that it's looking good. The job report was significantly higher than expected. So I think, generally speaking, what I'm being told is the first 6 months of 24 will be a slowdown, but it will be a measured slowdown, and it'll put pressure on, it'll put downward pressure on inflation, but it won't put downward pressure on the economic growth. So it's kind of interesting dynamic they're navigating through, and I think so far the Fed's done a good job with that. I think with that comment, my presentation is complete unless you have any questions regarding that or anything specific about the budget.
Sure, and I'll thank you, Mayor. I'll jump in. That was a lot of information thrown at you quite quickly, so it's a lot to absorb. But I think there's a couple of key highlights here. We're meeting all of our financial targets and our financial strategies that council has adopted. That's what we use to put this budget together. And our surplus funds, we feel is a good story in terms of what we're doing with those funds. We're putting it into roadway projects, capital projects, vehicle and equipment purchases, and funds for the vehicle and equipment reserve for future purchases, and to police and fire pension funding, in addition to our mandated police and fire pension fund amounts. So generally, when Mr. Hune talks about pension funding, what he's targeting is public safety pensions, and I know we talked about this quite frequently, quite a bit with council in terms of pension funding. What we're really focusing on is police and fire. So that's where our surplus funds are going. And again, as Mr. Hune mentioned, and as council reviewed way back in December, our community investment plan is a good story to tell with 200+ million over the next 5 years. That's reflected in this budget document. And in addition, on the expense side, what we have included in this budget is, I think, a modest addition in staff to help continue to support us in reaching, providing the customer service experience, providing our service level as expected. And as we know, expectations never go down. They only go up. And so with some added staff, that helps us to stay on top of our service demands. So I think I'm very proud of this budget document and this financial picture that this is reflecting of the town. It's also reflective of council's decisions in recent years and even in recent months in terms of your decision about the property tax levy. That levy was different than what we've presented to you in the past, because the tax levy that council adopted in December reflects some additional funding for the Normal Public Library for their abatement project, which is on the horizon. In anticipation, that levy anticipated a small amount of debt service to get their project to the finish line. So council has made some difficult decisions, and all of that, I think, is paying off in this budget.
Well, I'll say that this is refreshing to see. Last year was probably one of the best budgets I've seen in 20 years, and we've had some tough years and had to make some tough decisions. And it's kind of gratifying to see an even better budget come forward. And it gives us the opportunity to do some things we weren't able to do in past years, and really deliver services and capital improvements that we kind of put on hold or stretched out. It gives us the opportunity to really get caught back up again. Kudos to your team and to the entire town staff for bringing in such a great budget and presented well enough that we can all understand it. I think that's important. So at this point, we'll go to comments and questions, and Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Yoon, congratulations on once again receiving the award. Is it 36 years now in a row? So keep up the good work, and at this point, you can't afford not to get it.
Right.
And I spoke with you earlier today because I was asking some questions about the framework for your forecast. As you highlighted in the bar graphs, that we can't continue to expect some of the phenomenal increases in revenue, and we have had some inflationary pressure on our expenses. But how would you characterize your approach towards forecasting the revenue? What approach did you use? Did you anticipate a leveling off of the current trend, a scaling back?
Sure. Generally speaking, for sales tax, income tax, we leveled off and then grew back at a more reasonable rate. We're kind of more into the 1.5 to 2.5 to 3% growth, and we plan more of that growth to be past this next fiscal year to allow time for the recession to occur and what that impact might be. Although, again, what we're hearing is it's going to be minimal, if anything at all.
And again, scaling back the expectations is more from a standpoint, it's better to be prepared and have the dollars in the budget than to not forecast to have adequate revenues and then be scrambling to try to cover unexpected expenses or that didn't meet your forecast. And as you stated, the vehicle expenses were the only ones that, or the primary ones that you saw having inflationary pressure, but the operating expenses in the other department appeared to be not as responsive to inflation as they had in the prior years, correct?
Yeah, those areas seem to be calming down is probably the best way I can describe it, with the exception of the vehicle stuff.
And just to highlight, a number of years ago, the council had approved an annual increase of 2% in the water and sewer, and we've been able to stabilize the rates that we're charging residents and continue to have satisfactory coverage of operating and capital expenses rather than any surprises with some significant increases that catch people in a real bind to meet that. Do you think that 2% rate increase should continue to be satisfactory in the foreseeable future?
That's what we're seeing. The council has always kind of approached that from, in my thought, as an incremental increases to continue to keep those going. And that's helped us maintain the fund where we're having all of a sudden this significant, increase that we try to avoid. So I anticipate that being unchanged. We'll continue to recommend incremental increases to that process.
And in comparing the total revenue plus total expenses, because you highlighted in your presentation just the general fund, but there's actually like a $22 million shortfall of revenues covering the expenses. Can you outline what's included in the source of funding for that, what is not covered by revenues in the current budget?
Sure. That's primarily two things. One is we're using some excess reserve in general fund, so $5 million of the 22 or so is right there. A lot of it's capital related. ARPA funds are the significant ones. We have a $7 million deficit in that fund, but that's essentially a deficit because we've already collected all the $10.8 million that have come in as of last year. Now we're spending the funds in this year. So we're just basically spending balances that are carried forward. So roadway fund, ARPA, vehicle reserve to some degree, general fund, excess reserves are all creating what it looks like as deficit, but it's not a structural deficit. It's all basically capital spend down, cash we have online, capital in the bank.
Okay. And the debt service coverage that you highlighted, the accounting standards were changed recently to require entities to treat leases differently. Is the debt coverage still satisfying your expectations, even though more of the lease amounts are being reflected on the balance sheet instead of just on the income statement?
That's correct. That GASB came out to where it required us to put a new liability on the balance sheet. The only one that actually ended up on there was a rental lease for the space across the street. And that was always budgetarily planned to pay that debt. It's a rent payment. Now it's called kind of a long-term debt payment in terms of how they look at it philosophically. But there's no economic impact on the town. And in fact, that's an operational expense that we have. We show it now as kind of as a loan payment per se, but it doesn't play into our coverage ratio for our bonds. We keep that separate.
Okay.
And if I could jump in, I think that was included in the last audit report that we
Correct.
received in early December. And when Mr. Hume says the rent from the office across the street, it's basically the second floor of One Uptown Circle, where we have a number of our departments have their office space there.
And as you mentioned, the library did include the expenditures required for the abatement that they're anticipating, and their ask in the property tax is allowing them to take care of any debt service on that expense. Do we have any update from Mr. Fisher on the timetable for the libraries pursuing that abatement project?
We do, and I can ask Mr. Fisher, Normal Public Library Director, to step forward. While he's on his way up, I do know that the abatement project is currently out for bid. And so I'm going to steal a little bit of his thunder and just already tell council it's out for bid. Bids are due next week, Friday. Mr. Fisher can talk a little bit about the next step.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. And thank you, Council and Mayor and Ms. Reese, for allowing the library to be a part of this conversation. And thank you to Trustees Lane, Trundle, and Lindberg for attending tonight. Not a lot of update for the abatement project at this point. The bid is public. It was public a week ago. Pre-bid meeting was last Friday. We're expecting to open bids and hopeful for a successful bid on the 15th of February. The trustees of the library meet again on the 21st, which is the third Wednesday of February, and we're hopeful we'll have a bid to approve at that time.
Just one question. We talked about the increase in vehicle reserve and that as being significant, that we also do have, I'll let you categorize them, increases in materials, water plant chemical piping, just general materials that we use. We're seeing pretty good increases across the board on those materials.
Not as much as last year, but yes, we're still seeing increases there. We had a lot of that happen last year. We kind of programmed in the budget, the inflation increases associated with those in the out years. So you're right, we have seen increases this year, but we've already kind of accounted for that in the budget for the 5 years already. The only new thing was the vehicles.
Go ahead. Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, thank you. I'm not quite sure how tonight's going to go, because I know we're doing this in a little bit different order. So I have many more detailed questions, but I'm just going to go with a couple of high-level ones now, if that's all right. If you could, the one that I want to go back to is this slide 41, your debt restructure. You said I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm like, oh, yeah, you can. Spend all night on it for as long as I'm concerned. I think this is probably one of the more, I think it's 41, that's what I see in the bottom here. I think this is one of the more important issues for all of us to keep our eye on, the debt restructure, because it was developed under very different interest rate scenarios a few years back, and how that has changed. And so I have two questions. One is, and you alluded to it, that you feel like in a not so distant future, we would be in a position to refinance some of this at a lower, equal or lower. I mean, I guess you'd want to go lower.
Correct, yeah. So if you look on that third bond issue over the 2013 refunding, 2014, 2016A, and 2016B, we would plan to refund those when the opportunity arises as part of this debt restructure plan. That was never going to solve a lot of the problem because we always refinance when we think it's appropriate. So we thought we're not going to use any cash in those years to pay down debt unless we have some resources available. We weren't planning to do that at this time. We thought that we just do standard refunding in those years and pick up some savings during that time.
Okay, to sweep into future years.
Correct.
To pay off, yeah.
Correct.
That's what kind of worries me, is that we're not going to have those savings that we thought we were going to be able to bring forward.
And again, the interest rate environment now is not feasible, but even if we had a real strong interest rate reason to do this, if we did it, it contributes to our overall savings, but it wasn't going to necessarily make or break this process for a restructure.
So do I understand then that we are going to rely more on just our operational funds going forward to cover this?
Right, so what's happened to date is, Action 2, we paid off all the debt there, so those two payments in the yellow part of that spreadsheet where it says 1.3 million and 1.3, those are gone now. We're not going to
Okay.
make those payments. So that frees up of $2 million loss in those years, 1.3 we've already got covered.
Yeah.
And then if you look out further, that red square, we're going to pay those off when they become callable. So we're going to remove those debt service payments in those fiscal years.
Okay.
And
Okay, so which one are we paying off this year?
we're not paying off anything this year.
Oh,
We-
okay.
Basically, when we get to 26, 27 fiscal year, the 2017A refunding bond issue becomes callable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to take what we have available in unallocated TIF money in that, we're going to have some surplus there. We're going to pay off all those payments there. So in 26, 27, we're going to, everything in red, that red square, that 500,000 to 2.4 million, 2.5 almost, is all
Yeah.
going to get paid off immediately in that fiscal year. So then we're removing those payments from our debt service.
Okay. And a question about the surplus we have now. And we're allocating 3 million additional to pension, 2 million to, economic development. Was there another component?
It's kind of mixed. We're putting 3 million in the pension funds. We're putting a little over 1 million into roadway. We're putting $2 million into economic development. So there's kind of these last final balancing of the budget items that we use to those excess resources. So we basically fund everything we know we need to fund, capital, pension, and then if we have leftover funds, which we did, excess reserves, then we increase pension funding, capital funding, and economic development.
So so financially speaking, why wouldn't we take some of that reserve and pay down some of this? Is there not any to be paid down right now in terms of callable?
There is, that could be done. We're not recommending that because I'd prefer to get more further along on the debt service. But right now, to answer your question directly, if we were to do that, then I would recommend the 2013 payments and those $885,000 payments in that one section. We're not recommending that right now because we want to look at refunding that bond eventually, and we're still pretty far from looking at that refunding. And if we were to refund, we could do a partial refund or payoff, or depends. We didn't look at it then to see if we could do refunding as part of that. If we did refund it, we do some payoff perhaps.
I would like to supplement and indicate that we're looking at this whole scenario constantly and regularly with Mesero Financial, our advisors, who are constantly providing information about interest rates and what the environment looks like, when we should start digging a little bit further at refunding options. And as you indicated, Ms. Lorenz, we can't do anything until they're callable. So once they're callable, we want to make sure we have a plan. So some of these might be balancing what the interest rates look like versus what can we get if we put more capital dollars in and that.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's just a topic that I would like to keep at top of our, regular discussions is, when are there opportunities to strike? And, because this one keeps me up at night. It does.
Right.
So.
Right. And a lot of it boils down, at least again, in my humble opinion, is what's urgent right now. We want to put money into pensions, we want to put money into road work. The problem we're trying to solve, and your point's well taken, where is the best value for our extra dollar? Right now, to pay off a 28, 29 payment, principal payment, it's probably more better in our opinion to hit pensions and road work. And then we get closer to that date, we consider the resource we have at that time and where do we allocate.
Let's hope we have to.
Well, we will.
Yeah.
We will.
Okay.
The other, I did want to point out, and it was one of the last pages of the PowerPoint, but just for future reference, if you look at pages 268 and 269 of the proposed budget, that reflects it's the whole overall picture of our currently debt scenario, where we've got $82 million of debt issued by the end of the fiscal year. We'll be down to 64 million. It's a good story
It is.
for our organization our
Yeah.
size to be continually paying off our debt or refunding when it makes sense.
The other topic I want to address, because it was brought up here just a moment ago, is about the 2% increases. When was our last water increase? Did we have one? I don't think we had one last year.
I don't believe, I'm looking at John, we did not have one for current fiscal year.
Well, yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
the year we're in. So we didn't do one effective last April 1 of '23, but we did it prior to that, and we're proposing April 1 of '24.
So I understand that, and I've seen the increase in costs of your chemicals and basically of people and chemicals, and we don't want to shortchange our water. So I get that, and I do see the slides where the out years are concerning. The one that I kind of question is the 2% on the sewer. If I understand correctly, that's only about $100,000 that generates. Did I look at that right?
That sounds about right.
I think you
Okay.
had a slide that shows the fund balance, and you're correct, the proposed 2% rate increases we use to try to make sure we're meeting our our financial strategies and investing in capital as much as
Right.
possible.
And, you know, I've at times, for a lot of my years here, I've been a critic of the 2% and been kind of stingy on them. And so I'm going to continue to be stingy. But I actually understand and can see where the water and the taxing, I don't mean to use that word, but the pressure of the increased costs of chemicals has been real. The sewer fund doesn't look so bad to me. And since all of them, just sort of thinking publicly, you know, kind of public perception here, seeing that all of it gets billed into one bill, you know, unfortunately known as the water bill, you know, it's going to, you know, a 2% on water and a 2% on sewer is going to just be that much more of an increase when somebody opens up their bill. And so I just wonder if there was thought considered to, given that sewer fund looks pretty strong this year, that we take a pass on the sewer fund increase and just ride with it as it is, and but impose the 2% increase just on the water.
We, to be honest, we did not consider coming in with a budget that does not include a 2% increase, if that makes sense. There was a lot of negatives in there. So
I
basically,
think I understood.
we did not consider that. We came in with a plan to continue the 2% rate increase for both utilities because of our history of reinvesting in the system. So, you know, much of that is in the sewer fund and water fund, obviously much of that is operating and resources like staff and chemicals and the like on the water side. But we also don't want to get behind on capital investments and vehicle and equipment replacement costs for both of those utilities as well.
But as I look at this, you know, I ask the question, do we need to? Do we need to do that increase this year? Do we really need it?
Well, I guess I would say if council determined that they did not want to support a rate increase, would we get by? Yes.
Okay.
But not having a rate increase one year has a compounding effect in all years. So.
I know.
You know,
I've been
so
told that before.
my answer is, I think, gonna be exactly what it was last year. Is it going to harm the sewer fund to not have a rate increase for 1 year? No, but it does mean that we need to change the scope for the remaining years of the budget in terms of looking at projects and expenses.
I don't know,
But I-
something to consider. So I'll just leave it at that and wait for some other opportunity for my other questions.
McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hune. Always a interesting and enjoyable time, if you can believe that, of year for us, I think, looking through all of this, questioning our sanity. Appreciate once again, all the time you and all the staff take and helping us to digest a lot of information comprehensively, efficiently, so we can make good decisions and learn well to continue to keep us in a good space. So greatly appreciate all of this. Appreciate some of the updates in the book. For those who may be just looking at the budget book for the first time, in those early pages, really great illustration of how the budget process works in the town of Normal and timelines in a very concise and accessible way. You don't need to be an accountant or a finance person or even a councilman person to understand it. And it's great that you guys continue to make the transparency of our process simpler for everybody in the public to understand. So have a look if you're interested in learning more about that. At the outset, I guess I want to just pull way back up to the 10,000 foot view and say, you know, we said it's such a great budget last year, and this one looks even better than last year, which is great, and I think our citizens should be proud of their community and how well it's been financially managed. We're in a position where many communities aren't, where we're paying extra into our pensions instead of just trying to figure out how to pay them, and paying down debt and restructuring our debt despite some revenues going away that we had used before, and we're in a financial position to do that. All of this has been, what we're experiencing today is certainly part of what's going on in our economy, but it's also been the result of some planning from councils before us and some actions by many members of this council. Back in 2016, this body's decision to support Rivian investing in our community and us investing in them, and other companies that have done as well, has resulted in job growth and thereby revenue growth. And a lot of our revenues that we've seen are directly attributable to some of that, certainly some of it's statewide and the larger economy. But I feel we'd be remiss if we didn't tip our hat, at least to acknowledge that some of our position is because of the long-term planning and guidance from our staff and some of the decisions this body has made. So I'm particularly proud of some of those decisions, and I'm sure my colleagues are, and I felt it was worth mentioning. Some specific questions, again, at the high level. So I know every year you have to look into the crystal ball a little bit and project the economy, and that means revenues and that means expenses. And so interesting, you're projecting a flat income tax experience for us. Can you give us a little bit more on that insight and why that?
Sure. Some of that review is analytical. You know, we track it every single month, and then we project what the year will be for the fiscal year. We are seeing comparable to last year, it moderating downward. It's not flat yet, but it's moving that direction. We do talk to the state quite a bit. We read through their material. They've got a couple good analysts that look at income tax. You know, it's corporate, it's income tax. There was even some adjusting entries at state level for that. So we do our best to kind of work through that and then decide in the out years how things look. So the current year estimate is based on our assumption that we'll be flat because we're seeing it moderate down compared to prior year months. The out year, we're keeping, I think, 1% growth only because we're looking at inflationary costs. Not inflation, the possible recession. And then in the out years, we kind of go back to a 2% growth, I think. So we're being pretty conservative there. I think the current year estimate's not conservative. I think it'll be flat for sure. It'll be close to that. Out years, we're keeping at 1% because of recessionary concerns, and then beyond that, we're going back to regular inflation of 2%. But it's hard to estimate income tax.
Yeah.
There's so many variables there. You know, we thought during the COVID years we were going to see it flatten out and actually increase. Now, there were segments of the population that lost their positions in unemployment, but the other ones picked up. You know, tech and healthcare picked up, and restaurant businesses dropped down, and overall there was an increase. And so it's difficult to predict. We do our best. We talk to IML. We look at state DORs giving us. We do comparables to our peers. We do comparables to our own experiences. And it's hard to say we get close sometimes, other times we don't. You know, we want to stay conservative going out. So that's kind of the best answer I have for you in terms of that, is to flat, because we're seeing it flattening down for this current year. And then we're being very conservative on the out year growth because of recessionary concerns.
Got it. I was imagining that was somewhere along your lines of the answer. Usually when I ask about or this type of question over the last decade, you've generally responded with, we're being conservative.
I could probably just say that and stop talking, right?
No, that's okay. I appreciate that. Again, we end up with surpluses because your projections are conservative, and that's a great place for this organization to be and our community to be, is us being conservative with our projections. And if the economy proves us wrong in better direction, that's always a plus on the bottom line. But I think it's also a worthy comment in the public eye that we're not predicting doom and gloom. In income tax, we're just not predicting it to grow. That we can't expect straight line growth in revenue streams every year. And so it's prudent for us at times to be conservative with those. skipping down to the expense portion of your presentation, I too love that debt restructuring or retirement rather plan. Just love what it does and the simplicity of the format itself. But question on that: the debt retirement program is based on projected current revenues. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes.
So you're not projecting any new revenues?
No.
Or anticipating adding any revenues?
Correct, yeah. The restructure program is entirely expense side driven to reduce the debt, to reduce the debt payments, and we'll do that through surplus and reserve in the years they come callable, and potentially refunding has some savings too.
Again, another, I think, important comment for our community to understand is we're getting more aggressive with our debt restructuring program, but we're not going out to tax anymore and ask our residents to contribute anymore. We're doing it on the expense side of our balance, or
Right.
of our P&L side. Appreciate that. I was anticipating that's what you would say, but I am assuming the answer is yes, but in the water fund, your projections in the out years include the 2% and the sewer as well? Okay.
Correct.
I appreciate that. We continue to build in that program, and these conservative moderate increases has helped us to avoid substantial and very large increases. We've just seen simplicity from our friends to the south having to do nearly 100% increase in their rates over the course of 3 years as a result of not keeping up, and some other things. I don't want to presuppose their situation. But I think it's important that a rate structure and any kind of a funding plan continues to look at our capital needs, even though we can't know how many water mains are going to break. We can just try to hopefully keep ahead of them and estimate the increase in the cost of pipe and valves and appurtenances and all the sewer gear as well. So I'm supportive of that. It can be hard looking at a long-term plan and looking at a balance, and it looks really great. But if we start cutting at small portions of long-term plans, I worry about the long-term impact of the compounding impact of that as well. So I know that's difficult. It's difficult for me at times to look at that as well. The sewer fund, really more of a comment than a question. Not too many years ago, I think I mentioned this last year, this used to be one of our challenges. I remember every year in the budget, I used to go, sewer fund. And it became a thing, but thanks to you guys and this council, and you put a plan together that included some modest, not huge increases. We certainly felt them on our bills, of course, but what a great story that we've televised all of our sewers. We've lined a lot of the problem ones. We're proactively replacing portions of our sewer system before they're broken down. And what a great story. I just wanted to comment on that. I've got some other more detailed questions, but like my colleague, Ms. Lorenzo, I'll hold those and ask those at a later time. Thank you. And congratulations again on the award. Again.
Ms. Harris?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to go too long. I feel like everybody else has taken up all the air in the room already. So couple things that I have. First of all, thank you for putting this together. It's always so great to go through this, and thank you for the staff who also contributes to this being put together, because this is very helpful for us as we plan for the future for our community and our town. This is a great story, and I never want this to get lost. I don't want to repeat, but the sewer is a great story, but we also want to talk about health. That was also another one. The health and wellness was always, we literally saw red And this time there was not a red mark. We had some yellow, but no red. So that tells a great story for us. Always great to see that we have the surplus, all the different things that we're doing to put ourselves in a great position. I think one of my questions is because I'm competitive like that. I understand how ratings go, and I know we're one tick away from being AAA for Moody, and I know what plays into that is a lot of the decisions we make here. So whether you all don't have to answer this today, but I want you all to keep in the back of your mind, what can we do as a council to check off that tick so that we can say that we're AAA for Moody and Fitch? That's my thoughts. Again, I'm competitive like that, so I want to know, again, I know where we contribute to that. So what decisions do we need to make and be aware of to make the right decisions and have the correct conversations to get us there? My next thing is this is probably the first budget meeting I've come to, and I feel like I don't know, the one thing that we don't talk about in these, because a lot of times you can't, this is a very conservative conversation. This is a very planned conversation in the way we go off of strictly 100% what we know. And we really don't talk about some of the additional funds that are out there. But for me, usually I come to this dais at this point and I know, okay, here's what I know is coming down the pike statewide. Here's what I know is coming down federally that's going to be available. Okay, this might help us with this. Or, when we think about infrastructure, when we think about these transportation projects. But I think this is the first one I really feel like I'm out of what's to come that could be helpful to us, because we do know that has played a major role too in us being able to do a lot of the things that we do here and to be successful. So I think the other thing, again, might not be a question, but a good takeaway to think about. There's not a lot of buzz between IML and NOC. I'm not hearing a lot of buzz about monies available. So what can we do to tap into those things we normally have been able to really tap into and continue those level of projects that we're known for doing as a community? So those are my things that I think about too when I get into this budget. And so those were the things I did not hear, and these are the conversations that have not been said, but I needed them to be out there so that you all can think about them and let them be on the mind as we move forward. And other than that, thank you so much, and I'm so glad to see this, and I'm so glad to be a part of this council to know that this is the kind of work we're doing. Thank you.
I would just add to that anyone who can predict what the state and federal government's going to do going forward has a very lucrative career ahead of them.
I know.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Andrew, and your team, and all staff who had a part in this budget. I was on JBC early this morning, and Scott Miller had asked, how does the budget process work? And my response was that, well, staff, doesn't work on this quite year-round, with finance being the exception, but it's a several-month, probably 5-month, 6-month process for a lot of staff to get even to this point here today. So thanks, and I want to echo the appreciation on that front, and the good stewardship of taxpayer dollars for people in Normal. A couple questions. The first of which we haven't really dove into yet tonight is the $2 million set aside for economic development efforts. Can Mr. Hune or Ms. Reese, maybe somebody expand on that, how those funds are envisioned to be utilized? I mean, is the $2 million that, I assume it's just in general fund, unrestricted dollars, and is that 2 million will remain in the out years as well, or is that money that is a one-time? Expand on that 2 million, please.
Sure. Mr. Hune, that money we transferred into a capital line.
Yes.
I believe it's in just the regular capital, wouldn't be in roadway or anything like that. The regular capital line starts with fund number 325. And we, for lack of a better line title, I believe we called it Uptown 2.0. But the reality is that's where we felt we could park some money, some of this surplus revenue, to allow us to be in a position to help make some economic development deals happen. The economy has been very challenging for developers. The TIF is soon going to expire. We thought if we can take a couple $1 million and have it ready to go in the event that the right opportunity comes along, to partner with the developer to get a project to the finish line, then we're positioned to do so. In past years, a number of years ago, some of our major projects in Uptown, we were reactive, and we had to work hard to figure out a funding source to make our public side of the public-private partnership work beyond just a TIF incentive. That's when we got pretty creative with One Uptown Circle, with the Hyatt Place, and other major projects. So we thought, well, if we can be positioned to react, then maybe we can help a developer. And we've got nothing in mind at the moment. We just feel like these dollars can help us be positioned to help a developer get a project to the finish line. In terms of whether or not it's 1 year or 5 years, Mr. Hune, can you articulate what we planned for with the economic development line?
I believe we put $1 million in for next year and the following year $1 million. So we're putting money into that fund over a 2-year period. I know it wasn't all 1 year. I think it was the current year and next year, or next year and second year. But that's how they budget for it in this.
Yes, that's true. It's on page 251 of your proposed budget, and it's titled Uptown South Development. It's 1 million current year, or excuse me, 1 million year one, which would be 24, 25, and 1 million year two.
Thank you for that. Next thing I would like to highlight is just echo, there were some positive comments about our debt plan overall and how the town has managed that. And it's not lost on me that it was not all that long ago that the town's bonded debt overall was a big issue in the community. It was a big issue out there publicly. I know all of us sitting around this table heard about it a lot. And the fact that we were at, I believe, 67 million and some change, and we'll be down to about 64, if I'm not mistaken, this coming fiscal year, and continue to progress that, I think, is a real positive story across the board. So congrats on that, and thanks for that, and obviously being wise with restructure opportunities as they've been rising. Switching gears a little bit, want to talk about pensions, police and fire pensions. I know we've spoken about that a lot. So we did $6 million, 3 to police, 3 to fire, in addition to what we had originally planned last year. In the proposed budget here, there's an additional 3, 1.5 and 1.5 to police and fire. But I also see that in the revenue that was brought forth tonight, the increase in property tax revenue is something that has gone up notably from where we were a year ago, and wanted to, that primarily being that's going to police fire pensions too. Do you anticipate the need for more kind of lump sum infusions of cash like we're doing this year with the 3 and last year with the 6 into these pension systems to get us more on track? Or what level of pain point, I guess, are we going to be at with this as 2040 continues to get closer and closer?
Sure. We will continue to see upward pressure on our contribution as we do it regularly, just because of the 24 date and where our funding level's at now.
2040 date,
Yeah.
is that what you mean?
2040 date.
Yeah,
yes.
2040 date for 100% funding by 2040.
Right. I'm not sure what I said, but I apologize.
It sounded like 24.
Okay,
like
I'm
you
done.
said.
Oh, my God. So, correct, 2040. So honestly, when we have surplus funds, in terms of where's our best and highest use of our extra dollars, where should it go? Pensions, in staff's opinion, is very high, because the more we can get in that fund, the faster, then ultimately we pay less in the future. If you're 100% funded by 2040, if you look at I can show you a chart, it shows it going up, and after 100% funded, it drops down to a very, very minor amount of contribution, because we're playing catch up. And that's something that Moody's also looks at, is our funding for pension funds, which might interfere with our AAA rating, because I wouldn't categorize it as super well funded. So we attack that with reserves where it makes sense. So that's a priority. Road work's a priority. Those things are a priority. Debt payoff is a priority. So I can't say for sure if we'd recommend adding as a reoccurring basis funding, that would be that would not be a bad strategy. I think surpluses are a good place to park that money. Of course, I'll leave it to Ms. Reese to decide and ultimately what recommend to council, but that's what we have in the past is pension and pavement, because those are critical needs for the town, and always will be. Debt payoff is also critical, but let's we're coming down now in debt. So part of a pension strategy could be to allocate extra funds to it over and above the levy, and that would be something we could certainly discuss as a town and as staff. If we have surpluses, my recommendation to Ms. Reese will always be let's look at pension funding extra.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, especially because of the burden that property taxes continue to put on people across the state. Certainly not a normal specific issue, but it is an Illinois issue more than other states. And being able to increase that from surpluses and not strictly out of the levy, I think is positive all the way around. And the last thing I just want to, since it hasn't been verbalized yet, this work session is just to highlight the additions in full-time staff positions that are part of this budget. So changes in full-time staff for 24-25. This is page 364 of our packet. There will be a economic development director that's added, a technician in INT, a code enforcement officer being added in inspections, library position being added in the library, 3 to police, which included an office associate, vice detective, and vice sergeant position, and then in public works and engineering, a traffic technician and engineering technician. So that was verbalized and out there because those are changes to staffing levels that had not been.
Right, I appreciate
loud.
you mentioning that. Another page, so Mr. Preston referenced page 364, which provides details of the department and the specific positions being added. The other thing I wanted to just highlight for context reasons, page 363, the page prior, talks about our full-time equivalent positions, and basically, we're not looking at a huge change from the adopted budget. The adopted budget for fiscal year 23-24 had about 539 full-time equivalents. You'll see here it shows 534. That's because this is a snapshot in time. But then for fiscal year 24-25, presuming fully staffed, we'd be at the 544 mark.
Thanks.
Further? Ms. Smith?
I just wanted to add as an additional comment on the prioritizing of pension funding versus debt retirement. Currently, all of our debt service interest rate is below market rate. So we are in a better position with the interest rates we're paying currently. And so if we were to instead direct surplus dollars to the pension funding, we're providing a longer time for compounding of those returns, and it will have a greater impact on the funding levels if we do that earlier rather than later, whereas we don't get as much of a benefit to retire our debt now since we are below market.
Further questions or comments?
Yeah, so, in years past, we would have like kind of this segmented by department, and so we're not doing that, correct? So I can just ask any questions at any time? Okay. So up here, my packet, my budget just came apart.
Oh.
That's not good.
Oh, goodness.
So, I was in the earlier parts of the binder here. It talks about kind of our manager, mayor and council, city manager, administration, I think is another title. And I just noticed that travel went up quite a bit in our mayor and council, from about 30,000 2 years ago to I think 40,000 planned for this year. Why was that? I mean, it's not a big thing in the big scheme of things, but I mean, $10,000 in a you know,
Sure.
millions of dollars budget, but nevertheless,
I would say that I believe our travel budget is more in line with history. 2 years ago was COVID. Council, mayor was not traveling. Council members were not attending conferences. We now have council members going to NLC, National League of Cities conferences and Illinois Municipal League conferences. The mayor's traveling back to the U.S. Conference of Mayors events. In addition, the mayor's budget, and actually, I don't want to say too much more. I was thinking that some of the additional expenses are also associated with strategic planning costs, but that could be a different line. So I think it's primarily added travel now post-COVID, back to kind of our traditional travel plan.
on page 115, there was special programs. What's in that? It was, that also saw kind of a big jump from previous years, like it was kind of in the 20-some thousand, now it's 73,000. What all makes that up?
Yes, I just had that in front of me a moment ago, but then I changed my screenshot. So I believe in boards and commissions special programs that reflects some of the new programming that the Human Relations Commission is doing. Racial Equity Summit.
Oh, that was in your, okay.
Yes. I'll see if I can flip to that.
So is that
screen
racial
real quick.
equity summit something new? I think it is.
Yes, we did one in 2019, and they're trying to reintroduce that and just had posted that 2 weeks ago. I think.
And then are there other things in there?
I will have
You're
to take a
getting there?
moment to pull up
Okay.
my screen.
All right.
I should have called Mr. Hanson and had him on speed dial because he's the one that worked on
That,
it. There we go.
yeah, I think,
And there's the sorry, Mr. Hanson.
That's okay.
The Sister Cities program that we fund had a slight increase this year of a couple $1,000s. So it's a couple thousand out of that. And we've got the Racial Equity Summit. We actually budgeted for Youth on a Mission. And do you have anything else that you
no,
wanted
it's
to
just
add?
look at the memo that you had, it kind of details out
Yeah.
those dollar amounts. That's all I have in front of me.
Okay, so essentially
I-
speaking, racial equity summit, Sister City, and Youth on a Mission.
Yes, those are the most expensive items in that line.
And how has the Youth on a Mission been?
How has it been?
I mean, has it been, it's like in its third year, is it growing, is it?
I think there are more students this year than we've had in the past, so it is growing slightly, and I believe the students are looking forward to the attending National League of Cities, and they seem to be very active. So far this program year.
And then our funding for CBB, EDC, Small Business Development, where is that at?
That is all found in,
It's on page 116.
yes, that's in the general expense line, generally found in the
Is that 4030?
contract payments line, yes,
Okay.
4030.
So-
That's a big line. If you look at line item 4030, it's $3.4 million. So there's a lot of things that are funded.
2.26 of it is for the portion of the shared sales tax agreement that goes
Correct.
to the county. And then it looks like the Uptown Circle rent and other rebates. How is the funding for CBB and EDC and SBDC? Are they staying the same?
I believe SBDC is we're gonna be coming to council and asking for a slight increase in their funding and then an associated agreement with them to fund slightly more. But otherwise, everyone else is the same as current year.
For all out years?
Yes.
And where are we with maybe restructuring, that's not the right word, but re-looking at the agreement for the shared sales tax to cap it?
I received some more current information of 2023 expense that the county used with those shared sales tax dollars, so I just talked to Mr. Hune today. We're working on that number to figure out what year do we anticipate they will have the appropriate amount of dollars from our growing sales tax share? And then we'll talk with council, because next steps obviously are to talk to all of our partners about what that looks like, including Bloomington. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the city and the county, and so it would require all three parties to reach agreement. That particular topic, this initiative to evaluate that is part of our strategic plan. So it is certainly on our plate to get that evaluation done and a recommendation to council.
And what kind of presentation will they be providing us as part of the agreement? Will it be just a written one again, or will they come in for?
I believe it will be a written summary of how they're progressing since their 2023 report.
I'll be curious to see what their reserve levels are. Speaking of that, in the police, there was on page 178, plans for the county record management system. Is that our part of the Aegis system?
I believe. Oh, in terms of the 178 is their narrative?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that will be coming online this year. presumably?
425, yeah.
It's coming. Okay. And then I also, on that page, noticed expanded ALPR, the automated license plate reader, to private businesses. I thought that was something kind of interesting. Maybe at some point, we can share that, some more details. Sure. I'll take a pause if anybody else got a lot of questions, but I'll take a pause.
You have more, keep going.
Almost. Okay. How about, let's see. I noticed on the corporate council page that nothing was mentioned about municipal code redo, and that was on page 122. I thought that was kind of part of us expanding a few years ago, our staff for corporate council. And it is one of our items from our strategic plan. So where do we stand on that?
Well, we've got two folks representing either end of the table can
that's true. Yeah.
work on that. So it has not, in fact, is still a work in progress. It's certainly something that we'll make a note, make sure we highlight that in the final budget document narrative. And Mr. Day, do you want to give a summary?
Certainly. First, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me, Mr. Ulmer? In terms of the progress, so we recently executed some contracts with Unicode, who's going to do the background software. So rather than putting everything through Word or PDFs that we've done, we're going to have a cloud-based system where our code will be on, making it more easy, transparent for both the public to see and review as well as for us to draft. So we've gone through that process and have begun some general redrafting procedures, starting with kind of the lower hanging fruit. All right, how about that?
Much better.
Much better. Good thing. Microphone tickling my tonsil. So our first steps have been, we've gone through and sort of reorganized what our code will be. As you all know, our municipal code was last codified in 1969, so a couple of years ago. So we're looking through, our challenges with it are, one of our biggest challenges is run out of room, a lot of sections. Section 1, Section 2, and we have to put something in 0.5. So we've got a lot of those issues. So our biggest step is kind of going through the entire code. So that's been our first step. And through that process, typing out 1,200 pages.
So that is going to be something that you're working on in the coming year.
Absolutely.
They are working on it. The code has 20 some odd chapters, so they're trying to pick off sections at a time. We already did the personnel code. That's been all updated and renumbered. And in cooperation with planning and inspections, they're looking at zoning code information and the like. So it's a lot. It's a multi-year process, but we're working on it.
Yeah, and in terms of budget impact, there shouldn't be primarily.
Moving on then, a topic that we've sometimes discussed at these budget work sessions has been our fire staff, and just the increase in runs, and I noticed that was in some of the materials here. EMS runs continue to go higher. Looked like maybe fire runs were also up a little bit. Is that 67 still the right number, and how do we know that? And also, the other thing that runs through my head is, and somebody told me this just a few days ago, Rivian, when they presented to us way back however many years ago, their estimation was 1,000, maybe 2,000 employees, and they have 9,000 out there. And I mean, that's a small city out there. And how is that impacting, I suppose for all first responders, police and fire, how is that impacting our response and do we have the right people in the right place? So thoughts on that? I do see where police are adding some sworn officers, so that may be part of what their thinking is, but I didn't see any addition in fire. Wanted to ask about that.
Correct. So regarding police, the two sworn positions are supervisory. So by the time you promote two supervisors, then you have vacancies to fill. So there will be two additional sworn officers. So it's more a supervisory issue based on the demographics of the department right now. In regard to fire, your question of is 67 the right number? We leave that up to the professionals to recommend when they need more staff. The evaluation for fire has been, it's not just a formula of let's look at calls for service. It's looking at calls for service, looking at response time, all sorts of factors. Does Rivian impact the town of Normal and all departments? Yes. Does it impact public safety? Absolutely. Even more so, the first few years, it's impacted probably the building inspections department more than any department. But definitely fire, definitely police. But the calls for service to that particular business in the community are part of the formula that the chief and his leadership team look at in terms of staffing. I think when we've talked in the past about the fire department, I think council's aware that in fire, a 24-hour operation where employees work 24 hours on and 48 hours off, you don't just hire one person. If you're looking to fill one position, you're hiring multiple people to have that position covered each shift. So is that looked at? Absolutely.
Do we ever have, we've had, PACER study, we've had parking study. Do we just rely on our own internal data? Or do we ever get a second outside opinion?
In terms of how we should be staffed?
Yeah.
Nothing comes to mind in recent history where we've contracted with someone to do a staffing evaluation.
Okay, I just want to be mindful of, it's difficult to hire for police and fire. It's, you're on the front lines, and that's not lost on me. And I just want to make sure that we're directing resources to where, public safety is paramount. So
Totally agree.
And I appreciated, hearing more, and it's been presentations about, the wellness of the police officers and fire personnel that is important. And, sometimes that's been kind of a revelation to me that, we just, as public, we kind of just assume that you're going to be there and that you're going to be okay even afterwards. And I think what being up here and being part of this organization has made me realize is that, when you go and peel somebody off the pavement or, undo cars that are all snarled together, that's probably not easy to come away from that and then, just go back to business as usual. So I just want to express my appreciation for what they do. Oh, my goodness, okay. I didn't know.
So
All right.
if I could jump in and indicate, your concerns are everyone's concerns
Yeah.
up here, including fire administration and city administration. I'm happy to report that both police and fire currently can claim that they're fully staffed right now, which is something, a couple years ago, we were not in that kind of situation at all in public safety. Is public safety recruitment an issue everywhere? Yes. I think we can go home feeling very proud that we are fully staffed. In fact, Chief Humer shared today that by the end of the month, we'll actually have 3 additional firefighters beyond being fully staffed. We'll be excess staff. And we try to do that whenever possible to anticipate pending retirements. So, in terms of questioning staffing models and the like, I think it's important to recognize that the leaders of our public safety departments think of these same concerns. They have the same concerns as you, and their mission is to provide a high level, high quality of customer service, and our service level is second to none in public safety. And we've always said that, and I do want to at least acknowledge the reason why we are fully staffed right now is because of the police and fire personnel that have come forward and helped us find solutions. Both you, council might remember that a couple years ago when we were having staffing problems, we were able to find a successful eligibility pool of public safety candidates because both IFF 2442 and PBPA Unit 22 stepped forward and worked with us to change our hiring practices. And without that, we would be not in the position we're in today. So, I would say, I hear your concerns, but I think it's also a moment to express appreciation for human resources, police department and fire department that have been exceptional in finding strategies to make sure we continue to be as close to fully staffed as possible. And like I said, in this particular instance, having additional staff to set us up for pending retirements. So it's a good story.
Okay, I think we're saying the same thing. I just personally wanted to express my appreciation for all the first responders. And, quite honestly, you could just keep going down the line of every department, this time of year when we go through the budget and, page after page, whether it's library or street maintenance or water distribution, you realize all the talent that it takes to keep this place running the way it does. And I want to just express my appreciation for what everybody does in whatever capacity. Let's see, I think I just have maybe 1 or 2 items left. The underpass, that was on page 232. Maybe at offline, Mr. Hugan can explain kind of the flow of those funds in and out, the usage, but let's just kind of go high level. What is the total cost of the project, and is it reflected in that on that page 232?
I'm going to jump in while Mr.
Sure,
Ian gets to that page. It's actually reflected on page 233, the
233.
expense.
Okay.
We have done our best to anticipate the expected cost of the project given current bidding environment. Mr. Hume?
No, that's accurate. What's on that page is our best estimate of what we feel the total cost is going to be.
So that 24.3, 24.337?
Well, 3 million in the current year and then 24.3 in
Yeah.
next year. And
Okay, so
again, those-
27 altogether.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So that's not terribly different than what we anticipated. I mean, given, this has been a project in the making, so we're not that far off from our original estimates.
We're up a little bit. I believe the total overall, when you add all the years of expense, I think we're closer to 29-ish, 29 million.
Oh.
I'm looking at Mr. Otto, who's nodding his head.
Okay.
That, but in terms of revenue, we also included the additional reimbursement from IDOT for some expenses that had been incurred that we were waiting for them to agree to reimburse us for past expenses. And then the town's share is up about another million. So of our proposed $29 million expense, the town's share is still 2.5, I think.
I think it's about 2.8 in total local match under our current estimates for the project.
Okay, 2.8.
I believe it
2.8
was
million.
1 point something before, and then 1.1 this year, so about 2.8 in
Okay.
total town contribution.
Last question is probably just more broader thinking. I know we talk about, the next year and the out years, but with respect to water and sewer, and we touched on this earlier, you try to anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow, in terms of something that might break unexpectedly. You also try to, plan for maintenance and replacement, in years 2 through 5. But on both, I guess I just wonder, do we have what it takes in the next 5 to 10 years? I don't, I've learned a lot from Mr. Burkhart insofar as, thinking ahead to with those forever chemicals that are being now tracked more closely, and, sewer and stormwater and the impact that, extreme climate events have. So, are we positioned, are we positioning ourselves to think about that and to plan for that? And if I say this much longer, I'm probably going to talk myself into that 2% increase for sewer. What are some thoughts? That's probably a question for you, Ms. Reese, as far as, what are thoughts about sort of conceptually, how are we positioned for the next 10 years?
Sure, I'll try to start a response and then Mr.
Can we
Burkhart-
take that to 5 years, since we're in a 5-year budget? To
Well,
predict
yeah,
anything in
yeah.
today's world in 10 years is, that's asking
okay.
for a lot.
I mean, okay, going out to the furthest out year that makes Mr. Hune nervous, that year.
So here's what we know or what we anticipate. First of all, do we as leaders of the organization look at the more, I guess, critical issues like the forever cameras, the PFAS and
Yes.
lead lines and things like that? Absolutely. We talk about it all the time, that you get almost daily emails from the EPA on regulatory matters. So are those on our radar? Absolutely. In terms of, are we positioned well? Sewer, I think we continue to be positioned well. I feel like we've talked about that a bit. Water has the more EPA mandates that we must follow. Lead line replacements are something that we will be coming back to you, likely at your very next meeting, with a lead line replacement program that is EPA driven and EPA mandated. We figure in that particular instance, we have funds available, and you'll hear more about this in a couple weeks, but we'd rather just bite the bullet and be done with this whole lead line replacement program and move on. And so we think we're positioned well with finances in the water fund where we can get that done. In other things like PFAS, there are solutions. What's unknown there is, when is the EPA going to mandate some action, and that we don't know. That's when we have very important and significant relationships with our police and fire, with our lobbyists in IML and at the state level and with the federal level to help keep us on track with that. The The one thing is, there are other solutions that we're talking about is drilling more wells.
Mm.
And when you can drill deeper, you get a different type of water source that requires different treatment, than shallower wells. And so all those things are taken into consideration, which then play into our level of PFAS and those forever chemicals. So those are just examples of things that we talk about with Mr. Burkhardt and his team regularly, and he's constantly laying out a plan of what-ifs regarding EPA mandates.
Good. That's what I
And,
think I was looking for.
And then the other thing I'll mention is, as we talk about the 2% rate increase annually, obviously, where there's regular costs of doing business that we've already talked about, chemicals that are used in the treatment plant, materials used by distribution. But I think it's also important to note that the water fund is one of the funds that we can say every year when we do a rate increase, we are reinvesting heavily into the water system. In the last 8 years or so, the water fund has invested over $30 million in capital, in water main replacements and improvements and well drilling and the like. So it's all part of the Mr. Burkhardt's review of his operation.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to ask all my questions. I'm really sorry.
Item 6 is the omnibus agenda. Items considered routine and will be taken.
Do we need to go out of? Okay.
Items considered routine and will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion.
Item E as in Edward and H as in Herbert.
Second.
Please call items considered for omnibus or approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of January 16th, 2024. A report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of January 31st, 2024. A resolution to approve executive session minutes of August 21st, 2023, and to release executive session minutes from June 21st, 2021, and from August 21st, 2023. A resolution authorizing frame rail replacement and corrosion repairs to a 2006 Pierce ladder truck. A resolution authorizing the execution of a local public agency amendment number 1 with the Illinois Department of Transportation for design services for West College Avenue from Rivian Motorway to White Oak. And a resolution approving the agreement between the Public Safety Training Foundation and the Town of Normal for use of the Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics Training Foundation's facility. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Ms. Harris. Aye. Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Those items are approved. Item E is a resolution authorizing the execution of a joint funding agreement for construction work with IDOT, Illinois Department of Transportation, and a motor fuel tax resolution for the Gregory Street Trail extension from Adelaide Street to Parkside Road. Ms. Smith?
So moved.
Second.
I pulled this item just because, in conjunction with the work that is planned alongside College Road, that there's trail that's anticipated to be adjacent to the road when College Avenue is upgraded. But even with this extension on Gregory Street, there will be a gap. And so I wanted to highlight that it will remain as something the town will want to include in funding for future years to make it one contiguous trail on our west side.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris. Aye. Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, that item is approved. Item H is a resolution to award the bid for the Manchester, McKinley, McCormick, and Alexander Court Water Main Improvement Project to Stark Excavating in a total cost of $963,600. Ms. Smith?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
And I removed this item from the budget because in the documentation, it was mentioning that the water main was replacing 4-inch piping. And this is an established neighborhood, so I didn't know whether or not there was an increased demand or increased workload. And Ms. Reese, you indicated that the standards had increased. So even in our established neighborhoods, we're having to do some upgrades because of changing standards. I didn't know if you wanted to address that or if you wanted to call Mr. Otto to comment on it.
Well, I would call Mr. Otto, but he would be surprised because Mr. Burkhart's the water director, so I don't want to catch Mr. Otto off guard. But I will, while Mr. Burkhart's coming forward, it's not a changing standard. Our standard is 8-inch water mains, so these are old substandard mains, and this has been our practice for a number of years to work our way throughout the community, replace these substandard 4-inch mains, which probably was a standard decades and decades ago, with our current standard, which is 8-inch. Mr. Burkhart?
No, you are correct. This is some of our older water main in town. One of our goals for our water main replacement is to target these areas of 4-inch main. A lot of it's based off some timing of getting ahead of street resurfacing, street replacement projects, and then just kind of where they fit budgetarily in our budget each year cost. So this is one where this project fit for this year. And again, it's just getting rid of some of our older water main that could cause water quality issues.
Had there been any complaints from the residents? Had they noticed it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that item is approved. That concludes our omnibus. We have no general orders or new business tonight. We have no public comment signed up. So before taking a motion for adjournment, concerns or comments? Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Oh.
I probably, I owe you minutes, probably. May I say something?
Oh, absolutely.
This felt rushed to me tonight, the budget. I know we kind of have tried to reimagine the budget session, and, 6 hours was probably too much. Not gonna lie, by, hour 3 or 4, your eyes are kind of like, glazed over. But this felt really rushed for me tonight, and I'm sorry I dominated with a lot of questions, I think in preparation, because I knew we weren't gonna have kind of the, department by department explanation. Badly, this weekend, I read the whole thing, and I had questions. It's interesting. It's and I'm sorry in one regard that I dominated the conversation. I didn't mean to, but in another regard, I shouldn't be apologetic for that, and instead say that I think maybe something that is a little bit more of a hybrid of tonight versus what we've done.
Ms. Smith?
I just wanted to thank the members of the community who have put together a Night to Shine, which is scheduled for this Friday, where individuals with special needs are being given the opportunity to experience a prom event. And there are a number of volunteers involved to help prepare them for that event, including some makeup and hair fix-up and a ride around the parking lot in a limo. And I just think it's wonderful that this effort is made to sponsor this event in our town for a population that probably missed out on it in their regular high school years. But, so thank you to all the volunteers involved in that Night to Shine.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
It's a really interesting document. It's like I'm a nerd, but.